The fluorescent lights hum their tired song above my head as I wipe down table 4 for the third time tonight, my lower back screaming from 8 hours on my feet, and all I can think about is how Sophia's piano recital is in 2 days, and I still haven't figured out how to afford the dress she needs, because apparently every other 7-year-old will be wearing something special, and my daughter deserves to feel special too, even if her mother is barely holding everything together with minimum wage and sheer stubborn will. It's 11:15, and Rossini's is almost empty except for the usual late-night stragglers, and him, always him, sitting at table 7 like he owns the place, or maybe like he's waiting for something that will never come. And I don't need to look up to know he's watching me again with those dark eyes that seem to see straight through my carefully constructed walls. He arrived at exactly 9 o'clock, like he has every single night for the past 3 weeks, wearing another suit that probably costs more than my monthly rent, his hair perfectly styled even this late, his shoes so polished they reflect the ugly checkered floor, and he ordered the same thing he always orders: a bottle of Barolo that costs $200, the osso buco, the seafood risotto, 2 full meals like he's expecting company that never arrives. I've memorized his routine by now because I can't help it. Because working at Rossini's for 5 years means I notice patterns, and he is nothing if not a pattern. A ritual that repeats with unsettling precision. He sits. He straightens the silverware until the fork and knife are perfectly aligned. He drums his fingers on the white tablecloth exactly 47 times before opening the menu he never actually reads. He orders without looking at me, and then he waits. The 2 men in the corner booth pretend to read their newspapers, but I've seen them every night too. Always arriving 10 minutes after he does. Always leaving 5 minutes after he does. Their eyes constantly scanning the restaurant like they're expecting trouble, or maybe like they're the trouble themselves. Sal, my manager, watches the whole thing from behind the bar, with this knowing expression that makes me want to ask questions I'm too tired to actually voice, because I have another shift at the diner starting at 6 tomorrow morning, and Sophia needs to be at school by 7:30, and my sister can only help so much before her own kids need her attention. The kitchen staff is getting restless, Marco already scraping down the grill with more force than necessary, and the smell of exhausted fryer oil mingles with garlic and tomato sauce and the rain that started falling 20 minutes ago, tapping against the windows like it's trying to get in, like it wants to wash all of us away. The jukebox in the corner plays an old Italian love song, something sad and romantic that makes the empty restaurant feel even more melancholic. And I catch myself glancing at table 7 again, where he sits perfectly still except for his hands, which are trembling slightly as he reaches for the wine glass he never actually drinks from. Tonight there's something different about him, though. Something I can't quite place until I get closer to refill his water, and I see the bruise on his jaw, dark purple and fresh, barely hidden beneath his collar, and his hands are shaking worse than usual as he straightens the fork for the 100th time. I've served plenty of men in my 5 years here, plenty of rich ones and poor ones and everything in between, and I've learned to read the dangerous ones, the entitled ones, the ones who think a smile and a tip means I owe them something more than good service. But he's never felt dangerous exactly. Just desperate in a way that makes my chest tight because I recognize that desperation. I live with a version of it every single day. It's 11:30 now and I know what's coming because it always comes. This moment that has repeated every single night for 21 days straight. So I grab his check from Sal and walk it over to table 7, where both meals sit cooling and untouched, where the expensive wine has barely been sipped, where he sits like a man waiting for execution or salvation and can't tell the difference. He looks up at me as I set down the check, and his eyes are the kind of dark brown that would be beautiful if they weren't so haunted, if they weren't looking at me like I'm the only real thing in his entire carefully constructed world, and his voice when he speaks is rough, like he's been swallowing gravel, or maybe swallowing words he can't say. "Just eat dinner with me tonight," he says, and then adds, "please," like it costs him something, like that single word is being dragged out of his chest against his will, And I feel the same exhausted frustration I feel every time he asks, because doesn't he understand that I can't, that I won't, that accepting dinner from strange men, no matter how expensive their watches are, is exactly how women like me end up as cautionary tales. Sir, I say, keeping my voice professional and distant the way I've learned to do, I've told you, I don't date customers, and I definitely don't accept dinner invitations from men who tip like they're apologizing for existing, and it's true, because every night he leaves $500 on a $60 check, like he's trying to buy something that isn't for sale. He straightens the fork again, drums his fingers twice on the tablecloth, and says, I'm not asking for a date, I'm asking for company. There's a difference. And his voice cracks slightly on the word company, like it means something more than the dictionary definition, like he's asking for something he doesn't have words for. I want to walk away, I should walk away, but instead I hear myself say, there's always a difference with men like you, until there isn't, and I mean it because my ex-husband started with differences too, started with promises and apologies and explanations, until one day there were no differences left, just his fists and my broken ribs and a restraining order that took me 3 years to have the courage to file. Something flickers across his face then. Something that looks almost like pain. And he nods slowly, like he understands exactly what I'm not saying. Like maybe he has his own version of that story. The men in the corner booth shift slightly, one of them touching something under his jacket, and I realize with a cold clarity that whoever this man is, whatever he is, those men are his protection, or his prison, or maybe both. His watch catches the fluorescent light, and I can see it's a Patek Philippe, the kind of watch that costs more than I make in a year, maybe more than I'll make in 5 years, and his suit is custom-tailored, perfectly fitted to his broad shoulders and narrow waist, and everything about him screams money and power and danger, but his hands won't stop shaking as he reaches for the check. I start clearing the untouched meals, the beautiful osso buco with its rich sauce gone cold, the risotto that probably tasted amazing 2 hours ago, and I can feel him watching me with an intensity that should feel threatening, but instead feels almost protective, like he's memorizing my movements, like he's trying to solve an equation where I'm the only variable that matters. Marco yells from the kitchen that he's done for the night, his voice echoing in the empty space, and Sal starts counting the register with deliberate slowness, like he's giving us time for something I don't understand. The rain is coming down harder now, drumming on the roof, and through the window I can see the street is empty and dark, except for the streetlight that flickers on and off like it can't decide whether to illuminate or hide what happens here. He pulls out his wallet, that expensive leather kind that probably has a designer name I wouldn't recognize, and counts out 5 $100 bills with steady hands, even though his fingers were trembling a moment ago, and he places them on top of the check with such careful precision that I know this ritual matters to him, that everything about this matters in ways I can't comprehend. Please, he says again, softer this time, and I realize this is the 21st time he's asked me, the 21st time I've said no, the 21st time he's accepted my refusal with this quiet dignity that breaks something in my chest because most men don't accept no at all, let alone with grace. I take the money, our fingers don't touch because I'm careful about that, and I say good night, sir, same thing I say every night, and he stands slowly like his body hurts, and I notice for the first time that he's favoring his left side slightly, that there might be more injuries hidden under that perfect suit. Good night, Maya, he says, and hearing my name in his voice does something strange to my pulse because I never told him my name, which means he's been paying attention, which means this is more than random nightly visits, which means I should be scared, but instead I'm just tired and confused and strangely sad as I watch him walk toward the door with his 2 shadows following 3 steps behind. Sal locks the door after they leave and doesn't say anything, but his eyes meet mine across the empty restaurant, and I know he knows something I don't, something about who that man is and why he keeps coming back, and I want to ask, but I'm already thinking about tomorrow's shift and Sophia's recital dress and whether I can skip lunch for the next week to save enough money, so I just finished cleaning table 7, where 2 cold meals and an expensive wine bottle sit like evidence of something I don't understand, like proof that somewhere in this city a handsome man with sad eyes is eating dinner alone and wishing I was there. And I tell myself it doesn't matter, that he's just another customer, that tomorrow night will be exactly the same. But as I walk out into the rain toward the bus stop, I can't stop thinking about the way his hands shook when he said, "Please," like that word cost him everything he had left to give. Night 24 starts with my hands shaking so badly I drop a full tray of water glasses in the kitchen before my shift even begins. The crash loud enough to make Marco jump and Sal come running, and when he sees my face, he just quietly helps me clean up the mess without asking questions, because what would I even say? How would I explain that? When I got off the bus 3 blocks from Rossini's, I could see the police tape wrapped around my apartment building, like yellow ribbon on the world's worst present. Could see the flashing lights painting my neighbors' faces blue and red as they stood outside in the cold, watching officers go in and out of the building that's been my home for 3 years. My landlord called me at 2 in the afternoon, his voice tight, with what might have been concern or might have been anger that his property had been violated, saying there'd been a break-in. My apartment specifically. Everything ransacked, drawers pulled out and emptied, closets torn apart, even Sophia's room destroyed, her stuffed animals ripped open like someone was looking for something hidden inside their cotton stuffing. And the only thing that kept me from completely falling apart right there on the phone was him telling me that Sophia was safe, that she'd been at school when it happened, that my sister had already picked her up and taken her home. I called my sister immediately and heard Sophia crying in the background, asking if her toys were okay, if her piano books were okay, if Mommy was okay. And I lied and said yes to all 3, even though I have no idea what state anything is in, because I can't afford to miss this shift. Can't afford to lose even one night's tips, because we were already 3 months behind on rent. And now I'll probably have to pay for damages and new locks and God knows what else. So here I am at Rossini's going through the motions like a robot, taking orders and delivering food and smiling at customers while my brain keeps showing me images of Sophia's room destroyed, her safe space violated, her childhood ripped apart by whoever did this, and the worst part is not knowing why, not understanding what anyone could possibly want from us, because we have nothing, we own nothing worth stealing. We're barely surviving as it is. The dinner rush passes in a blur of forced normalcy, and then it's 9 o'clock, and I know without looking that he's here, can feel his presence like a change in air pressure, and when I finally turn around to look at table 7, he's already sitting there. But something is different tonight. His posture is rigid instead of carefully relaxed. His jaw is tight, and those 2 men in the corner booth aren't pretending to read newspapers anymore. They're just openly watching with hands inside their jackets like they're ready for something. He orders the same thing he always orders, but his voice is clipped, efficient, and his eyes track my movements across the restaurant with an intensity that feels different from the previous 23 nights. Less like longing and more like calculation, like he's solving a problem I don't know exists. I avoid table 7 as much as possible, let another waitress deliver his wine and meals. But I can feel him watching me, and I can feel myself cracking, can feel 3 weeks of refusing him, and 5 years of holding everything together, and 28 years of surviving, despite everything combining into this pressure in my chest that's making it hard to breathe. Sal keeps looking at me with concern, and finally around 10:30, he tells me to take a break, practically orders me into the back office, but I can't sit still. Can't stop thinking about Sophia sleeping at my sister's house in borrowed pajamas, because hers are probably scattered across our destroyed apartment. Can't stop imagining her fear and confusion, and the way she'll look at me like I failed to keep her safe, because that's exactly what I did. By 11:15, the restaurant is empty, except for table 7, and the 2 shadows in the corner and me, and I can hear the rain starting outside, tapping against the windows like it's trying to tell me something, and thunder rumbles in the distance like the sky is angry too. Marco leaves through the back, calling out goodnight, and I hear the lock click behind him, and then it's just me and Sal and them. and I grab the check off the printer with hands that won't stop trembling, and I walk toward table 7 like I'm walking toward something inevitable, something that's been coming since the first night 3 weeks ago. He looks up as I approach, and I see it immediately, the way his eyes widen slightly, the way his hands go still on the tablecloth, the way every muscle in his body seems to tense like he's preparing for impact, and he opens his mouth to say what he always says at 11:30, but I don't let him. I can't let him, because if he asks me one more time with that desperate please, I'm going to shatter into 1,000 pieces right here on this ugly checkered floor. Fine, I say, slamming the check down harder than I mean to, my voice coming out sharp and bitter and broken all at once. Yes, I'll eat your damn dinner with you, because I have nowhere else to go anyway. My apartment was broken into, my daughter's terrified, and I can't afford to miss a single shift to deal with it. So yes, I'll sit at your table and pretend this is normal. Is that what you wanted? The words come out in a rush, and I don't even realize I'm crying until I taste salt on my lips. Don't realize I'm collapsing into the chair across from him until I feel the hard wood beneath me. And then it's all coming out. 3 weeks of holding my walls up, 5 years of surviving on pure, stubborn will, a lifetime of refusing to let anyone see me break, and it's all spilling out in front of this stranger, with his expensive suits and his desperate eyes and his nightly ritual that I never understood. Are you happy now? I ask, and my voice cracks on the words. Is this what you wanted? To watch me break? And I hate how weak I sound. Hate that he's seeing me like this. Hate that after 23 nights of maintaining my dignity, I'm falling apart on night 24. Something changes in his face then. All the careful hesitation and nervous energy dropping away like a mask he's been wearing, and his hands that were always shaking go completely still. His shoulders straighten, his jaw sets, and suddenly he looks different, dangerous, powerful in a way that should terrify me, but instead makes me feel something close to safe. No, he says, and it's the first time I've heard real, raw emotion in his voice. God, no. I wanted to see you safe. That's all I've ever wanted. And there's something in the way he says it that makes me look up at him through my tears, because that's not the answer I expected. That's not what men who ask women to dinner 24 nights in a row usually want. Safe, I repeat, and I can hear the disbelief in my own voice. You don't even know me. And it's true because he's a stranger, just a customer who tips too much and asks too persistently and watches me with eyes that seem to see too much. But then he starts talking, and everything I thought I knew falls apart because he says, I know you work 2 jobs. I know you have a daughter named Sophia who has piano lessons on Thursdays. I know your sister picks her up from school when you work doubles. I know your ex-husband hasn't paid child support in 2 years. I know you're 3 months behind on rent, but you still slip 20s into homeless veterans' cups on your walk home. I know you. And each fact he lists is like a small violation, a proof that he's been watching me, studying me, learning me without my permission. You've been stalking me, I say, and the fear finally catches up to the anger, the realization that this man knows where my daughter goes to school, knows my schedule, knows things about my life that strangers shouldn't know. And I start to stand up, because suddenly, sitting across from him feels dangerous, feels like a trap I walked into with my eyes open. I've been protecting you, he says, and his voice is firm now, commanding. And he makes a small gesture with his hand, and I hear the click of the front door locking, see Sal dimming the lights like this was planned, like everyone knew something I didn't. There's a difference. What difference, I demand, because I can't see one, can't understand how watching me without my knowledge is anything other than creepy and wrong, and exactly the kind of thing my ex-husband used to do before the controlling turned to bruises. He pulls out his phone, taps it a few times, and slides it across the table toward me, and what I see on the screen makes my blood go cold because there are photos, dozens of photos, but they're not of me exactly. They're of men watching me, following me, sitting in cars outside my building, standing across the street from Sophia's school. And in every photo these men are focused on me or on my daughter with an intensity that makes my stomach drop. These men aren't mine, he says, leaning forward. his dark eyes holding mine with an intensity that pins me to my chair. "They've been circling you for 5 weeks. I've been trying to figure out why before approaching you directly," and I swipe through the photos with shaking hands, seeing the same faces appear again and again, seeing myself in the background completely unaware that I was being hunted, that Sophia was being watched, that we were in danger I didn't even know existed. The rain is coming down harder now, thunder rolling closer, and the restaurant feels different with the lights dimmed and the door locked, and his 2 men positioned at the exits like sentries. And I realize this isn't a restaurant anymore, it's a fortress, and I'm either protected or trapped, and I can't tell which. "Who are they?" I ask, and my voice is steadier now because anger is replacing fear. Because if someone is threatening my daughter, then I need to know who and why and how to stop them. He takes a breath, runs a hand through his perfectly styled hair, and for the first time it falls slightly out of place, making him look more human and less like the untouchable figure he's been for 23 nights. And he says that's complicated, but the short version is that 5 weeks ago, something was hidden in your apartment building, something dangerous people want back, and they think you might have it or know where it is. I laugh then, a bitter sound that has no humor in it. Because what could possibly be hidden in my falling apart apartment with its leaking faucet and broken heating and walls so thin I can hear my neighbors arguing? What could I possibly have that anyone would want besides debt and exhaustion, and a 7-year-old daughter who deserves so much better than the life I can give her? He's watching me carefully, his 2 meals sitting between us growing cold, just like they have every other night. But this time I'm sitting across from him. This time the barrier is broken, even if it wasn't broken the way he wanted. And I can smell the osso buco and the risotto and the expensive wine he never drinks. Can smell my own fear, and his cologne that probably costs more than my weekly grocery budget. Sal appears with coffee, sets 2 cups down without a word, and I realize he's known about this, known about the danger, known why this man kept coming back night after night, and I feel betrayed and protected all at once, because Sal has always looked out for me, has always made sure I got safe shifts, has always let me take home the leftover bread and pasta when he pretends not to notice. The 2 men in the corner booth shift positions, and I see the bulges under their jackets clearly now. See the way they watch the windows and the door, and I understand with absolute clarity that everyone in this room is armed except me. That everyone in this room knows something about violence that I've only experienced secondhand through my ex-husband's fists. "So what now?" I ask, looking at the stranger who isn't really a stranger anymore, who has been watching over me for 3 weeks, who knows about Sophia's piano lessons, and my homeless veteran 20s, and the child support that never comes. What happens now that someone broke into my home looking for something I don't have? "Now," he says, and his voice is gentle again despite the hardness in his eyes. "Now you let me help you. Let me keep you and Sophia safe while we figure out what they're looking for and how to end this. And I want to refuse, want to maintain my independence and my walls and my stubborn insistence that I can handle everything alone the way I always have. But I'm so tired, so scared for Sophia, so completely out of my depth, that for the first time in 5 years I hear myself say, okay, just, okay." And his shoulders drop slightly, like he's been holding tension for 3 weeks, waiting for that one word. And then he's making calls on his phone in a language I don't understand, while the rain pounds the windows and the thunder shakes the building. And I sit across from him at table 7, finally sharing his dinner, even though neither of us is eating, finally accepting what he's been offering, even though it's nothing like what I thought he wanted, finally understanding that sometimes the monsters aren't the dangerous men in expensive suits asking you to dinner. Sometimes the monsters are the ones you don't see coming until it's too late. And sometimes the only way to survive is to trust the person you've been running from for 24 nights straight. He pushes one of the plates toward me, the osso buco with its rich sauce still steaming slightly, and says, "Eat. You need your strength for what comes next." And I want to refuse on principle because taking food from him feels like accepting more than just dinner. But my stomach betrays me with a loud growl that echoes in the quiet restaurant, and I realize I can't actually remember the last real meal I had. Maybe yesterday's lunch break, when I split a sandwich with another waitress. Maybe the day before, when I gave most of my dinner to Sophia because she was still hungry after finishing hers. The first bite is better than anything I've tasted in months. The meat falling apart on my fork, the sauce rich and complex in a way that cheap food never is, and I hate that I'm sitting here eating expensive Italian food while my daughter sleeps in borrowed pajamas at my sister's house. Hate that this moment of comfort exists in the middle of so much fear and chaos. He watches me eat for a moment, something soft passing across his face, and then he starts talking, his voice low and steady like he's briefing soldiers before a mission, telling me things that sound like they belong in a movie and not in my actual life. 5 weeks ago, he says, a flash drive went missing from a courier working for a rival organization, the Castellano family, and that courier was killed for it, made to look like a random mugging in an alley 6 blocks from here. But his people knew better, because men in their world don't get killed randomly. Every death is a message or a cover-up or both. The courier's last known location before his death was my apartment building, he continues. And I stop eating because suddenly the food tastes like ash. Suddenly I'm understanding that the place where Sophia plays and sleeps and does her homework is connected to murder, to organized crime, to a world I've only seen in movies. Intelligence suggests he hid the drive somewhere in the building before they caught up to him, Dante says. And the way he says intelligence makes it clear he has sources and resources I can't begin to imagine. Probably in your apartment specifically, because the courier had been working as the maintenance man for 3 months under a false name, doing repairs and installations all over the building, but he spent the most time in your unit the week before his death. My hands start shaking again, and I set down my fork, because suddenly I'm remembering the maintenance man, remembering how he'd show up to fix things I never reported broken, how he installed those new shelves in Sophia's closet that I'd been grateful for because we needed the storage space, how he'd been friendly but not too friendly, professional in a way that made me feel safe having him in my home. The Castellano family believes the drive is still hidden somewhere in the building, Dante continues, his dark eyes never leaving my face. They've been watching you for 5 weeks, waiting to see if you lead them to it or suddenly produce it, waiting to see if you even know it exists. And that's why I couldn't just approach you directly, couldn't just tell you that you were in danger, because the moment they saw us talking, they would have assumed you told me where it is, and they would have moved from watching to acting. I feel cold despite the warm food in my stomach, cold all the way through as I think about those photos on his phone, those men watching me walk to work, watching Sophia skip to school, waiting for the right moment to do what exactly? To break in like they did today, to hurt us, to kill us the way they killed the maintenance man who I let into my home, who I trusted around my daughter. So the begging, I say, and my voice sounds hollow, the puppy dog eyes, the please eat with me, that was all an act, all some kind of protection strategy you came up with to keep me in public view where they couldn't touch me without witnesses. He flinches slightly at my words, runs his hand through his hair again, and says the begging was real. The reason behind it was complicated, and there's something in his voice that makes me look up at him, something raw and honest that wasn't there before when he was playing his role. You could have just told me I was in danger, I say, could have pulled me aside and explained instead of this elaborate performance every night, instead of making me think you were some kind of obsessed customer, and even as I say it, I know it's not fair because I can already guess his answer. Would you have believed me? He asks quietly, or would you have thought I was the danger? And I sit there at table 7 with the cold rain hammering the windows and the dimmed lights making shadows dance across his handsome face. And I think about what I would have done 3 weeks ago if this stranger in an expensive suit had approached me and told me I was being watched by criminals, told me my life was in danger, told me to trust him. The second one, I finally admit, I would have thought you were trying to scare me, manipulate me, maybe hurt me yourself. And he nods like this confirms something he already knew. Like he's been inside my head understanding exactly how my walls work and why they exist. Exactly, he says. So I waited. Every night I waited for a moment when you might trust me enough to listen. When circumstances might break down your defenses enough to let me in. And I hate that he's right. Hate that it took my apartment being ransacked and Sophia being scared and me hitting rock bottom to finally accept his help. And tonight I broke, I say bitterly. Tonight I became weak enough to be manipulated. And he leans forward then, his hand reaching across the table not to touch me, but to gesture at the space between us. And he says, "Tonight you survived. There's a difference. Surviving isn't weakness, it's strength. It's choosing to live instead of maintaining pride while you die." The words hit something in my chest. Something that's been tight and hard since my divorce. Since I learned that asking for help was dangerous. That trusting people got you hurt. That the only way to stay safe was to handle everything alone, no matter how heavy the burden got. Sal appears with fresh coffee, sets it down with his usual efficiency, and says your friends have been keeping my cook safe walking to his car. I figured it was a fair trade, and I stare at him because this means Sal has known for weeks that something was happening, that I was in danger, and he let it happen. Let this man come in every night and perform his ritual without warning me. "He was trying to protect you," Dante says after Sal walks away. "We all were. Sometimes the best protection is not knowing you need it, and I want to argue, but I'm too tired, too overwhelmed, too busy trying to process that my quiet manager has been part of some kind of conspiracy to keep me alive." Dante slides a folder across the table, thick manila filled with papers and photographs, and his fingers brush mine as I take it, just for a second. Just long enough for me to feel the warmth of his skin and notice that I don't pull away this time. Don't flinch at the contact the way I would have yesterday. Inside are more surveillance photos, documents with official-looking letterheads, police reports marked confidential, and a photo of the maintenance man I remember, his face smiling at the camera in what looks like a driver's license photo. Except his real name isn't Tom Wilson, like he told me. It's something Italian that I can barely pronounce. He was their courier, Dante explains. Been with the Castellano family for 15 years. Trusted enough to move sensitive information. And 5 weeks ago, he tried to run with something he shouldn't have taken. Something worth enough that they killed him for it and have been tearing apart your building looking for it ever since. "What's on the drive?" I ask. Because if I'm going to be in danger, if Sophia is going to be in danger, I deserve to know what we're risking our lives for. What's valuable enough to justify breaking into homes and threatening children. "That's complicated," he says, but he must see something in my face because he continues. "Financial records, offshore accounts, proof of crimes that could bring down their entire organization. Evidence that certain police officers and judges and politicians are on their payroll. The kind of information that gets people killed just for knowing it exists." "And they think I have it," I say. "They think I'm sitting on evidence that could destroy them." Which means they're never going to stop looking. Never going to leave me and Sophia alone until they either find it or become convinced it's not in my apartment. He nods slowly, his jaw tight, and says, "That's why we need to find it first. Need to use it as leverage to get you out of this. To make sure they understand that touching you or Sophia means the information goes public, means their entire world burns down." I take another bite of the ossobuco even though I'm not hungry anymore. Just need something to do with my hands while I think. And that's when I remember, when the memory clicks into place like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing. "The maintenance man did work in my apartment," I say slowly. "He installed new shelving in Sophia's closet about a week before the break-in happened. And I watched Dante's entire body go still. Watch his eyes sharpen with an intensity that's almost frightening. Watch him transform from the nervous man who begged me every night to someone calculating and dangerous." "Show me," he says. And it's not a request. It's a command delivered in a voice that expects to be obeyed. "Tonight, We need to find it before they come looking again. And I realized that the break-in today wasn't random violence. It was them searching. And if they didn't find what they were looking for, then they'll be back. And next time I might not get lucky enough to have Sophia somewhere else when they come. The rain is still pouring outside, thunder shaking the windows, and I look at this man who has been watching me for 3 weeks, protecting me without my knowledge, begging me to trust him with that one repeated question. And I make a decision that goes against every instinct I've built over 5 years of survival, every wall I've constructed since my ex-husband taught me that trusting men gets you hurt. Okay, I say, let's go. And he stands immediately, pulling out his phone and speaking rapid Italian to someone, his 2 men moving to the exits with practiced efficiency. And I realize I'm about to let a man I barely know take me to my destroyed apartment in the middle of the night to search for something that people have killed for, that people will kill for again. Sal appears one more time, hands me a bag with the leftover food packed carefully, and says for Sophia, for when this is over, and there's something in his gruff voice that makes my eyes burn, because he's looked out for me for 5 years, given me shifts when I needed them, looked the other way when I took home food, kept secrets I didn't know needed keeping. Dante helps me into a jacket I didn't bring, one of his that smells like expensive cologne and safety. And as we walk toward the locked door where the rain is waiting, I think about how 24 nights ago, a stranger sat down at table 7, and I had no idea that accepting his invitation would mean this, would mean trusting him with my life and Sophia's life, would mean stepping into a world of violence and danger and organized crime that exists just beneath the surface of the normal struggling life I thought I was living. He opens the door and the rain hits my face like a baptism or a warning, and his hand touches the small of my back, guiding me toward a car that's too expensive to belong in this neighborhood. And I realize there's no going back now, no returning to the illusion of safety I had before I knew I was being watched, before I knew my apartment held secrets worth killing for, before I said yes to dinner with a man whose hands finally stopped shaking the moment I sat down across from him and let him tell me the truth. The drive through rain-soaked streets happens in tense silence. Dante's hands steady on the wheel of a car that probably costs more than I'll make in 10 years, leather seats that smell new and expensive, dashboard lit up with more technology than I can identify, and behind us 2 more cars follow at precise distances like we're a motorcade or a funeral procession, and I'm not sure which comparison is more accurate. My apartment building looks different at night with police tape flapping in the wind, and most windows dark because it's past midnight now, and working people have to sleep even when their homes have been violated, even when danger circles like sharks smelling blood in the water. Dante makes a phone call in Italian, sharp and commanding, and within minutes, a man in a police uniform appears and removes the tape from the front entrance, waves us through like we have every right to be here, and I realize with sick clarity that this is what corruption looks like up close. This is how people with money and connections move through a world that's supposed to have rules that apply to everyone equally. His men fan out as we enter the building, taking positions I don't understand but that clearly means something to them. And Dante keeps one hand on my lower back, guiding me toward the stairs, because the elevator makes too much noise, leaves us too exposed, too trapped if something goes wrong. My apartment is on the 3rd floor, and climbing the stairs feels surreal. Every step taking me closer to the place that's supposed to be my sanctuary, Sophia's sanctuary. The 4 walls where we've built our small life despite everything working against us. The door is still broken from the break-in, hanging slightly crooked on its hinges, and when Dante pushes it open, I see the destruction in person for the first time, and something breaks in my chest, because this isn't just property damage, this is violation, this is someone ripping through the life I've built and discarding it like garbage. The living room is destroyed, couch cushions slashed open, books pulled from shelves and scattered across the floor, pictures of Sophia pulled from frames and tossed aside, and I can see into the kitchen where every cabinet is open, contents spilled across counters and floor like someone was looking for something small enough to hide anywhere. Dante moves through the apartment with practiced efficiency, checking rooms and closets, his gun appearing in his hand so smoothly I barely see him draw it, and two of his men position themselves at the front door and the fire escape window while he leads me to Sophia's room. Her bedroom looks worse than I imagined, worse than the landlord's description prepared me for, because whoever searched here wasn't careful, wasn't respectful of a child's space. They tore apart her stuffed animals looking for hidden compartments, pulled her mattress off the bed frame, dumped her toy box and scattered puzzle pieces across the lavender carpet. She picked out herself when we first moved in. The glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling are still there at least, still forming the constellations I taught her, Big Dipper and Orion's Belt and Cassiopeia, but everything else is chaos and destruction. And I can imagine her face when she sees this, can imagine her tears and her fear and her questions. I won't know how to answer. The closet, Dante says quietly, and I force myself to focus, to push down the rage and grief and focus on why we're here, what we need to find before they come back looking for it again. The shelving unit the maintenance man installed is still intact somehow, white particle board that looked cheap but functional when he put it in, and Dante kneels in front of it, running his hands along the edges with careful precision, his fingers finding seams and joints I would never notice. He pulls a small tool from his pocket, something that looks like a flat screwdriver, but more specialized, and begins methodically taking the unit apart, piece by piece, screw by screw, while I stand behind him watching and trying not to think about Sophia's destroyed stuffed animals, or her scattered books, or the fact that strangers were in here touching her things, violating her safe space. It takes 10 minutes of careful work before he finds it, a false back on the bottom shelf that looks solid, but comes away to reveal a hollow space carved into the particle board itself. And tucked into that space is a small flash drive, black and unremarkable, smaller than my thumb, the kind of thing you could buy at any electronics store for $10. This, I say, staring at the tiny piece of plastic and metal, this is what they killed someone for, what they ransacked my home for, what they've been threatening me and Sophia over, and Dante nods as he slips it into his pocket, his face grim, and says this contains enough information to destroy the Castellano family completely, to bring down their empire and everyone connected to it. So yes, this is worth killing for, worth dying for. Before I can respond, his phone buzzes with an alert that sounds different from normal notifications, more urgent, more insistent, and he pulls it out, looks at the screen, and his entire body goes rigid in a way that makes my stomach drop. What? I ask. What's wrong? And he's already moving, already pulling me away from the closet, already speaking rapid Italian into his phone while the two men at the door respond in the same language. Castellano's men are converging on this location, he says, his voice clipped and professional. A corrupt cop monitoring the break-in report tipped them off that someone accessed the building. They know we're here. And I feel cold spread through my body because trapped in my destroyed apartment with criminals coming sounds like exactly the kind of situation that ends badly, that ends with bodies and police tape and Sophia losing her mother. How long? I ask. And he says 5 minutes, maybe 10 if we're lucky, and then he's making another call, speaking to someone with authority I can hear even in a language I don't understand, and within 2 minutes the apartment transforms, his men pushing furniture against the door, checking windows, taking positions that turn Sophia's innocent bedroom into something that looks like a war zone. We wait for reinforcements, Dante says. Could be an hour, could be 3. They need to navigate the police cordons and Castellano's men without starting a war in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I realize with absolute clarity that I'm trapped in my daughter's bedroom with a mafia boss, possibly about to be killed, with the very thing that started this all in his pocket. Tell me what's on it, I demand, because if I'm going to die here, I deserve to know why. Deserve to understand what Sophia will lose her mother over, what my life is worth in the currency of criminal information. Dante looks at me for a long moment, seems to be deciding something, then gestures to Sophia's small bed with its princess comforter, says sit. This will take a minute to explain. And I sit on the edge of my daughter's bed, while this dangerous man in his expensive suit sits beside me. The bed so small our shoulders touch, and he pulls out a gun and begins disassembling it with practiced hands that move with unconscious efficiency. It's financial records, he says as he works, offshore accounts, proof of money laundering, bribery, murder for hire payments, 3 decades of the Castellano family's crimes all documented by their accountant. And I watch his hands clean and check the weapon with casual competence that should terrify me, but instead feels almost reassuring, because at least someone here knows what they're doing. Why do you want it? I ask, because this is about more than just protecting me, more than keeping a random waitress safe from danger she didn't ask for. This is personal for him in a way I don't understand yet. His hands pause on the gun, just for a second, and when he speaks, his voice has an edge I haven't heard before. Something raw and hurt and angry all at once, because my father is on that list. He was their accountant before he tried to go legitimate, tried to build something clean for his family, and they killed him for it when I was 19. Killed him and made it look like a heart attack. And I spent years not knowing the truth until pieces started emerging, until I inherited his territory and his connections and his enemies. So this is about revenge, I say. And I don't mean it to sound judgmental, but it comes out that way anyway. Comes out like I'm disappointed that his motives aren't as pure as I wanted them to be. This is about truth, he says firmly, looking at me with those dark eyes that have watched me for 3 weeks, and about stopping them from doing to other families what they did to mine. This drive proves my father was trying to leave, trying to testify, trying to do the right thing, and it clears his name with everyone who thought he died a criminal. Outside, I can hear car doors slamming, voices calling to each other, footsteps on stairs, and Dante's men shift positions, check weapons, prepare for something I don't want to imagine. Why not go to the police yourself, I ask? Why not just hand over the evidence and let the system handle it? And he laughs, a bitter sound without humor, and says because half the names on that drive are police, judges, politicians. The people who are supposed to enforce the law are the ones breaking it. The only way to take down an empire built on corruption is from the inside, with proof they can't deny or destroy. He finishes reassembling the gun, checks the magazine with hands that never shake now, not like they did at the restaurant every night. And I realize that the nervous man who begged me to have dinner was a performance. A mask he wore to seem less dangerous, less threatening. And this is who he really is. Someone comfortable with violence. Someone who knows how to survive in a world I've only glimpsed from the outside. I'm not a good man, Maya, he says quietly, his shoulders still touching mine on Sophia's tiny bed. But I'm trying to be better than the man who killed my father, trying to honor what he wanted to build. And I've spent the last 8 years slowly legitimizing the operations I inherited, cleaning up territories, getting out of the worst businesses, trying to leave something behind that won't destroy the next generation. The lamp on Sophia's nightstand creates a small circle of light in the growing darkness, shadows dancing across lavender walls, and I can hear radios crackling outside the door, can hear his men speaking in low tenses voices about positions and angles and things I don't want to understand. Tell me about your father, I say, because we might die here in the next few hours, and suddenly I want to know who this man really is. Want to understand the person who has been watching over me without my knowledge, who begged me every night with desperate eyes and shaking hands. His name was Antonio, Dante says, staring at the glow in the dark stars on Sophia's ceiling like they're telling him something. He was an accountant who got recruited by the Castellano family in his 20s because he was smart with numbers, because he could make money disappear and reappear in ways that seemed like magic. And he did that job for 15 years, built them an empire, helped them become untouchable. But then I was born, Dante continues, and something changed in him. He started seeing the violence and the corruption and the bodies, started understanding that the numbers he was managing represented real people being hurt, real families being destroyed. And he wanted out, wanted to build something legitimate for his son to inherit. They wouldn't let him leave, I say. And Dante nods, says they never let anyone leave, not when you know what he knew, not when you can testify to what he could testify to, so he started documenting everything, building a case, preparing to go to the authorities. And someone found out, someone warned them, and he died 3 weeks before he was supposed to testify. I'm sorry, I say, and I mean it because I understand loss. Understand what it's like to watch your parent fail to protect you, to build the life they promised. My mother died when I was 16, and my father drank himself to death within 2 years because he couldn't cope with being alone. We sit there on Sophia's bed, surrounded by her destroyed stuffed animals, and his armed men, and the growing sounds of danger outside. And I realize that we're both orphans in a way, both people who lost parents too young, both people trying to give the next generation something better than what we inherited. How old are you? I ask, because he looks young, late 20s maybe, too young to have the weight I see in his eyes, too young to carry the responsibility he's describing. 31, he says. I inherited everything at 19 and spent the next 12 years trying to figure out how to honor my father's memory while surviving in a world that wanted me dead for being his son. And somewhere in there, I became the thing he was trying to escape. Became a man who orders violence, who makes decisions that get people killed, who lives in shadows and secrets. But you're trying to change, I say. You've been legitimizing operations, trying to build something better. And he looks at me then, really looks at me, and says, I met you 3 weeks ago, and watching you work 2 jobs to give your daughter piano lessons made me want to try harder, made me remember why my father wanted out in the first place. Because there are people in this world like you, good people trying to survive despite everything, and they deserve better than to be collateral damage in wars between criminals. The building shakes slightly, something heavy hitting the front entrance, and Dante's men tense, adjust positions, and I realize that the siege is beginning. That whatever happens next will determine whether Sophia has a mother in the morning, whether this man who has been watching over me gets his revenge or his redemption, or just becomes another body in a long line of casualties. He reaches over and takes my hand, his fingers warm and steady, and says, I'm going to get you out of here, Maya, going to make sure you and Sophia are safe, even if it costs me everything, and I believe him because I can see it in his eyes, can feel it in the way his hand holds mine, can understand finally why he begged me every night for 3 weeks. Because somewhere in his watching, he stopped seeing me as a person to protect, and started seeing me as something more, something worth the risk, worth the truth, worth sitting on a child's bed in the middle of danger and revealing who he really is beneath the expensive suits and the careful masks. Thunder rumbles outside, mixing with the sound of men moving through the building, and I squeeze his hand back. This stranger who isn't a stranger anymore, this dangerous man who makes me feel safer than I felt in years. And I say then, we both walk out of here. Both survive this. Because Sophia needs her mother and your father's memory deserves to see his son finish what he started. And Dante smiles then, just slightly, just enough to show me that beneath everything, he's still human, still capable of hope, still fighting for something more than just survival in a world built on violence and corruption and secrets that get people killed. 3 hours pass in strange, elastic time, minutes stretching into eternities when footsteps echo in the hallway outside, then compressing into seconds when we hear voices discussing tactics and positions and breach points in Italian that Dante translates in whispers, his body tense against mine as we sit on Sophia's bed, listening to our own possible deaths being planned just beyond the door. Dawn is creeping through the window now. Soft pink light that feels inappropriate for the situation, light that belongs to new beginnings and hope and children waking up safe in their beds, not to adults trapped in a child's room waiting for violence to find them. Dante's phone buzzes again, and I watch his face change as he reads the message, watch the hard line of his jaw get harder, Watch something that might be despair flicker across his features before he locks it down behind that mask of control he wears so well. What? I ask, though I'm not sure I want to know. And he takes a breath before answering. Says my reinforcements can't get through. Castellano called in favors. Police are cordoning the entire area claiming active shooter situation. My people are stuck 6 blocks away and Castellano's men will breach within the hour. The words hang between us like a death sentence, final and absolute. And I think about Sophia waking up at my sister's house, asking for me, being told something terrible by adults with sad faces and careful voices, growing up without a mother the way I grew up without mine. And rage fills me so completely that for a moment I can't breathe around it. There has to be another way, I say. But Dante is already shaking his head, already standing up and checking his weapons with movements that have become familiar over these 3 hours, and I can see in his posture that he's made a decision, that he's already committed to whatever plan has formed in his tactical mind. I'm going to surrender, he says simply. I'll give them the drive and myself in exchange for your safe passage out. My men will escort you to Sofia. You'll get new identities that my people have already prepared. You'll disappear somewhere they can't find you, somewhere you and your daughter can build a life without looking over your shoulders. No, I say immediately, standing up too fast, my head spinning from 3 hours of adrenaline and fear. Absolutely not. You don't get to make that decision for me. You don't get to sacrifice yourself like it's the only option. Maya, he says, and his voice is gentle but firm. This is the only way to guarantee your safety, to guarantee Sophia gets her mother back. They want me anyway, want revenge for my father's betrayal, want to eliminate his bloodline. This just moves up a timeline that was always coming. You spent 24 nights trying to protect me, I say, my voice rising despite the danger, despite the men outside who might hear. I'm not letting you die after 3 hours of honesty. I'm not accepting your protection if it costs your life. That's not a trade I'm willing to make. He crosses to me then, takes my shoulders in his hands, and his eyes are dark and determined and already grieving. And he says, you don't have a choice, this is happening. My men have orders to take you out the fire escape the moment I walk out that door. You'll be halfway across the city before Castellano even realizes he doesn't have you. Like hell, I say, pulling away from him. You think your men can force me to leave? You think I'll just go quietly while you martyr yourself for some misguided sense of chivalry? And he says it's not chivalry, Maya, it's math. It's recognizing that your life is worth more than mine, that Sophia needs you, more than the world needs another criminal trying to play hero. That's not your decision to make, I shout. And I don't care anymore who hears me. Don't care that his men outside the door have gone silent listening to us argue. You don't get to decide you're disposable. That's not love, that's martyrdom. That's you giving up because it's easier than fighting. What's the difference? He shouts back. And it's the first time I've heard him raise his voice. The first time I've seen real emotion crack through his control. What's the difference when you're the thing worth dying for? When keeping you alive is the only good thing I might do with the life my father gave me. Because I love you, he continues. And the words seem to surprise him as much as they surprise me. He stops mid-motion, hand frozen in the air between us, face shocked at his own confession. I love you. I've loved you since the first night I saw you defend a drunk customer who couldn't pay his bill by covering it yourself, watching you count out bills from your own tips with this fierce, determined expression, like you were daring the universe to stop you from doing the right thing. I've loved you through every no, he says, and his voice is raw now, vulnerable in a way I haven't heard even through 3 hours of siege. Every suspicious look, every moment you saw through my bullshit and called me on it. Every time you maintained your boundaries and reminded me that you weren't for sale no matter how much I tipped, and I begged you to eat dinner with me because those 30 minutes were the only time I felt human, the only time I could pretend I was just a man asking a woman he admired to share a meal. So yes, he finishes, I'll trade my life For yours, because losing you would kill me anyway. Because walking out of here knowing you're dead would be worse than whatever Castellano will do to me. Because at least this way, Sophia gets to keep her mother, and you get to live the life you've been fighting so hard to build. I'm standing there with tears streaming down my face, with dawn light painting Sophia's destroyed room, pink and soft, with stuffed animals that have been ripped apart watching this confession like an audience. And I realize that somewhere between his first desperate pleas and this moment, I've been falling for him too. Falling despite my walls, despite my determination never to trust another man, despite every logical reason to keep my distance. Love is finding a way to live, I say, crossing the small room to stand in front of him, taking his face in my hands the way I wanted to do at the restaurant, but didn't have the courage. For Sophia, for your father's memory, for the fact that I haven't let myself feel anything since my ex destroyed me, and in 3 hours you've made me feel everything. What are you saying? He asks, and his hands come up to cover mine, his face in my palms rough with stubble, warm with life, real in a way that makes this danger feel surreal by comparison. I'm saying I'm not watching another man I love die, I tell him, and the words feel like jumping off a cliff, like admitting something I didn't know was true until I said it out loud. We're both walking out of here. We're both surviving this, because I didn't say yes to dinner with you just to lose you before we even get a chance to see what this could be. He kisses me then, pulls me close, and kisses me like a man who thought he'd never get the chance, desperate and fierce, and tasting like the coffee we shared hours ago, and the tears on both our faces and goodbye, and hello all mixed together. And for a moment, the siege doesn't exist, the danger doesn't exist. There's just his mouth on mine and his hands in my hair, and the feeling of being held like I'm precious, like I'm worth protecting, like I'm more than just a struggling single mother barely keeping her head above water. When we break apart, we're both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, and I can hear his men outside shifting uncomfortably because they definitely heard that kiss, definitely heard this entire emotional breakdown, and I should be embarrassed, but I'm not. I'm just determined, just focused on the problem we need to solve. Then we find another way, I say, together. We figure out how to both survive this, because I refuse to accept that dying is the only option. There has to be something we're not seeing, some angle we haven't considered. He pulls back slightly, looks at me with something like wonder and says, "What are you thinking?" And I can see him shifting modes, see the tactical part of his brain engaging again now that survival is back on the table as a goal. My sister, I say, the idea forming as I speak. She works for the CISO, District Attorney's Office, as a paralegal. She has connections to prosecutors and federal agents, people outside the local corruption. If we can get the drive to her, she can trigger an emergency federal investigation, bring in people Castellano doesn't control. Dante's eyes sharpen, his mind clearly working through possibilities, and he says that could work. Federal involvement would force everyone to back off or risk exposure. But we can't just walk out of here. Castellano has the building surrounded. The moment we step outside, we're dead. We need a distraction, I say. We need them to think we're still here while we're actually gone. And I look around Sophia's destroyed room, at the fire escape outside her window, at the layout I know from 3 years of living here, and an idea starts forming, dangerous and desperate, but possible. His phone is already out. He's making calls in rapid Italian, explaining something to his men, and I can hear the shift in their voices, hear hope replacing resignation, hear them starting to plan, instead of just waiting to die. "We'll need to move fast," Dante says, turning back to me. "We'll have maybe 5 minutes between when they think they're breaching and when they realize we're gone. 5 minutes to get you to your sister, to get that drive into federal hands. 5 minutes to change everything." I nod, my heart pounding, and he cups my face again, kisses me once more, softer this time, like a promise instead of a goodbye, and says if this works, if we both survive this, I'm taking you to dinner, a real dinner, at a real restaurant where you can say yes because you want to, not because you're trapped. If we survive this, I tell him, pulling him close one more time, breathing in his scent and his warmth and his solid realness. You're meeting Sophia. You're explaining to a 7-year-old why her mother's apartment got destroyed, and why there are men with guns, and why we might need to move and change our names, because if I'm choosing you, then she gets to choose too. Deal, he says, and I can hear the smile in his voice, can feel the shift from desperation to determination, can sense that we've moved from accepting death to fighting for life, and his hands are steady as he checks his weapons one more time, as he speaks quietly to his men about the plan we're building together. As he looks at me like I'm not just someone to protect, but someone to fight alongside, someone whose intelligence and courage and connections are just as valuable as his tactical training and criminal resources. The dawn light is stronger now, morning fully arriving, despite the siege, despite the danger, despite everything. And I think about how 24 nights ago I refused his invitation because accepting felt dangerous, felt like losing control, felt like opening myself up to being hurt again. And now here I am planning an escape with him, trusting him with my life and Sophia's future, choosing love in the middle of violence because sometimes the most dangerous thing is not the criminals outside the door, but the walls we build that keep everyone out, even the people who might save us. His men are ready, positioned at the door and window, and Dante takes my hand, squeezes it once, and says ready, and I squeeze back. Think about Sophia waiting for me. Think about the life we might build if we survive this. Think about this man who begged me for 24 nights and is now willing to fight his way out of hell to give us a chance. And I say ready. Let's go home. Let's live. Let's find out what happens when two broken people choose each other, despite everything saying they shouldn't. And he smiles, really smiles, the first genuine smile I've seen on his face, and it transforms him from dangerous to beautiful, from a man preparing for death to a man ready to fight for life. And together we move toward the window where the fire escape waits, where dawn is breaking over the city, where somewhere my daughter is waking up, and somewhere federal agents are about to get the case of their careers, and somewhere a future is waiting that neither of us planned, but both of us are willing to risk everything to reach. The smoke alarm triggers exactly on schedule, piercing shriek cutting through the tension, and within seconds I hear other alarms joining the chorus throughout the building, automated system responding to the small controlled fire. Dante's tech specialist started 3 floors above us in a vacant unit, flames contained but smoke spreading exactly as planned through the ventilation system. His men move immediately, practiced efficiency that comes from years of coordinated operations, and I hear shouting in the hallway, Castellano's people confused by the sudden emergency, trying to decide if this is real or a trap, while precious seconds tick away. The building's evacuation protocol kicks in, residents stumbling into hallways in pajamas and robes, demanding to know what's happening, adding to the chaos we need. And through Sophia's window, I can see fire trucks already approaching because Dante's people called it in the moment the alarm started. Legitimate emergency response arriving to legitimize our escape. Dante pulls paramedic uniforms from a bag his men pass through the door, real ones stolen or bought or acquired through whatever criminal connections he has, and we strip quickly, efficiently, no time for modesty or embarrassment, just survival instinct and the understanding that we have maybe 3 minutes before Castellanos' people realize the fire is a diversion. The uniform smells like someone else, like antiseptic and smoke from previous emergencies, and Dante adjusts my collar with gentle hands, checking that I look authentic enough to pass casual inspection. And I do the same for him, smoothing down the jacket, making sure his weapon is hidden beneath the bulky fabric. His men are moving furniture away from the door now, preparing for the firefight that will make Castellanos. People think we're still trapped here, think they've won when they finally breach. And I see the grim determination on their faces, the acceptance that some of them might not survive the next 10 minutes. And I want to say something, want to thank them for dying so I can live. But Dante shakes his head, says they know, they chose this, and there's no time for sentiment when seconds matter. The hallway is full of smoke now, real smoke from the controlled fire mixing with theatrical smoke his people added, visibility reduced to almost nothing. And we slip out of Sophia's room into the chaos, moving with the flow of evacuating residents. Dante's hand on my lower back guiding me but letting me lead, because I know this building, know these hallways and stairwells and the basement route that maintenance uses, the path I've taken 100 times doing laundry and avoiding the broken elevator. Behind us, I hear the first gunshot, sharp crack that makes residents scream and run faster, and I know his men have engaged Castellano's people, creating the distraction we need, making them think we're still fighting from inside the apartment while we're already gone, already moving through smoke and panic toward the basement door that no one else thinks to use. The stairwell down is narrow and dark, emergency lighting casting everything in red shadows, and I lead now, taking Dante's hand and pulling him down steps I could navigate blind, down to the basement where the building's guts are exposed. Pipes and electrical and the tunnel system that connects to the neighboring buildings, old infrastructure from when this neighborhood was new, and someone thought underground passages were practical. We move fast through darkness that smells like mold and rust and decades of neglect, my hand trailing the wall for guidance, Dante close behind me trusting that I know where I'm going even though he can't see anything. And I think about how 3 hours ago I was demanding truth and now I'm literally leading him through darkness, literally guiding him to safety using knowledge he doesn't have. The tunnel is claustrophobic, ceiling low enough that Dante has to duck, walls close enough that we brush them constantly, and I can hear his breathing behind me, steady despite the exertion, controlled despite what must be discomfort for someone used to commanding spaces not crawling through them. Water drips somewhere, echoing in the confined space, and rats scatter at our approach, and this is the unglamorous reality of escape. Nothing like movies, just darkness and dirt and desperate navigation through spaces humans weren't meant to occupy. We emerge 3 blocks away in another building's basement, climbing out through a maintenance access that I've used before when avoiding my ex-husband in the early days after our divorce, when I learned all the hidden routes through this neighborhood, all the ways to disappear when you need to, and the building's super is someone I know, someone who doesn't ask questions when I wave, and keep moving through his lobby toward the street. Dawn is fully here now, morning light harsh after the darkness of the tunnel, and I see her immediately. My sister's car idling at the curb exactly where Dante's people told her to wait, and through the window I see Sophia in the back seat, her face pressed against the glass scanning the street, and when she sees me, her expression transforms from worry to joy, and I'm running, forgetting the plan, forgetting caution, just running toward my daughter like nothing else matters. "Mommy!" she shrieks as I pull open the door, launching herself at me with 7-year-old abandon, and I'm crying again, holding her tight, breathing in her shampoo smell and her warmth and her alive, solid realness, checking her over for injuries I know she doesn't have, but need to confirm anyway because that's what mothers do. We verify that our children are whole, even when logic says they are. My sister is watching with wet eyes, and she says I was so scared, Maya, the way you sounded on the phone. I thought I'd have to tell her you weren't coming back, and I squeeze her hand, say I'm here, we're okay, and then I remember Dante standing on the sidewalk in his paramedic uniform looking completely out of place and utterly beautiful in the morning light. "This is Dante," I say to my sister, pulling him closer. "He's complicated, but he's mine." And she raises her eyebrows at the possessive claim, at how quickly I've gone from refusing to date to introducing a man to my family, but she just nods and says, "Okay then, nice to meet you, Dante. Thanks for keeping my sister alive." He reaches into his pocket, pulls out the flash drive that started everything, and hands it to my sister with careful ceremony. Says this is evidence in multiple federal cases, money laundering, corruption, murder for hire. My people have been recording this exchange since we emerged from the building. There are cameras on us right now documenting the chain of custody, and you need to call your FBI contacts immediately. Tell them this is time sensitive. Tell them Castellano family operations need to be hit within the next 2 hours, or evidence will be destroyed. My sister takes the drive like it's explosive, holds it gingerly, and says I'll make the calls from the car, but you two need to get off this street, need to disappear until this shakes out, and Dante nods, says we have a safe house prepared, says his people will handle everything, and I realize he's been planning this, planning for every contingency, making sure every angle is covered. Sophia is watching Dante with open curiosity, the way children do when they're trying to figure out adults and their confusing relationships, and she tugs my sleeve and whispers loud enough for everyone to hear, "Is he your boyfriend, Mommy?" And I feel my face heat because explaining complicated adult situations to 7-year-olds is impossible. Explaining that I met this man 3 weeks ago, and we've spent most of that time with him watching me from across a restaurant, is definitely impossible. Your mom tells me you're learning piano, Dante says, kneeling down to Sophia's level, showing the instinctive intelligence of someone who understands how to talk to children. I'd love to hear you play sometime if that's okay with you. And Sophia lights up because piano is her favorite subject, says I'm learning Für Elise. It's really hard, but Miss Catherine says I'm doing good. Do you like music? I do, Dante says, and his smile is genuine, warm in a way I haven't seen before. My father used to play piano. He taught me when I was your age. Maybe sometime I could play with you. And Sophia nods enthusiastically, already half in love with this stranger who knows about piano and is making her mother smile. Are you Mommy's boyfriend? Sophia asks again, more directly this time, and Dante looks up at me, his eyes asking permission, asking if he's allowed to claim that title, and I nod slightly because after everything we've been through, after confessions in her bedroom and kisses that tasted like survival and choosing to live together, boyfriend seems inadequate, but it's the word Sophia understands. I'd like to be, Dante says, still looking at me. If your mom will have me, and Sophia giggles and says, Mommy never has boyfriends. She says men are too much trouble. But I think you're okay because you made her stop crying, and the simple child logic of it makes everyone laugh, breaks the tension of the moment. My sister starts the car, says I'm making those calls now, you three figure out your relationship status later, right now we need to move, and she's right. We're still exposed, still in danger until federal agents move. So Dante and I climb into a different car his people have waiting around the corner, sleek and anonymous, and we drive through morning traffic while behind us the city starts to wake up to the news that will dominate headlines for months. 3 months later, and I'm walking into Rossini's on a Friday night, Sophia's hand in mine, and everything looks the same but feels completely different. Same checkered floors, and same smell of garlic and tomato sauce. Same jukebox in the corner playing old Italian love songs, but the energy has changed. Lighter somehow, happier, like the restaurant itself knows that darkness has lifted. Sal sees us and smiles, waves us toward table 7, and I notice the restaurant is busier than it used to be. More families, more laughter, and Sal later tells me that the new anonymous owner has been investing in the place, upgrading equipment, raising wages, making it the kind of restaurant the neighborhood deserves. Table 7 is waiting, 2 place settings arranged with care, wine glasses that catch the light. And Dante is already sitting there, but he stands when he sees us. This formal gesture that makes Sophia giggle and makes my heart squeeze because he's wearing a suit, but it's more casual than before. More relaxed, and his eyes when they meet mine are warm and open and happy in a way that 3 months ago I couldn't have imagined. Sophia runs ahead, climbs into the booth behind table 7 where Dante's people have set up coloring books and crayons, where she can be close but occupied. And I notice the 2 men sitting 3 tables away pretending to read menus, Dante's security detail that Sophia doesn't recognize as anything other than regular customers, protection that looks like normalcy. I sit down across from Dante without asking, without hesitation, and he reaches across the table for my hand, this gesture that's become familiar, comfortable, ours. And he says, "So what are we eating tonight?" And I smile because the question is different now. Collaborative instead of desperate, partnership instead of begging. No more begging, I ask, and he shakes his head, says no more refusing, and I laugh and say deal, and it feels like we're making a promise bigger than dinner, bigger than this moment, promise about a future we're building together. The waitress brings menus, and I realize I don't work here anymore, don't have to spend my nights on tired feet serving other people, because 3 months ago, an anonymous scholarship paid for nursing school, an anonymous benefactor ensured Sophia's piano lessons continue, an anonymous trust fund appeared that covers our rent and expenses while I study, and none of it is anonymous, really. I know exactly who is making sure we're taken care of. Making sure I can build the life I always wanted, but never thought I could afford. Sophia asks if she can have spaghetti, and Dante says of course, asks if she wants to tell him about her piano recital next week, and she launches into an enthusiastic description of the piece she's performing, and I watch them interact. Watch this man who 3 months ago was ready to die for me now sitting in a restaurant making my daughter laugh, and I think about how we got here, about 24 nights of him begging and me refusing, about danger that forced truth, about choosing love in the middle of violence, about learning to trust again when everything said I shouldn't. The news broke 2 days after our escape. Federal raids across the city, Castellano family operations dismantled in coordinated strikes, arrests of police and judges and politicians whose names I recognized from local news. And buried in the coverage was a small story about Antonio Russo, accountant who died 12 years ago, how new evidence proved he was cooperating with authorities, how his death was murder, not natural causes, how his name was being cleared posthumously, and I watched Dante read that article with tears in his eyes, watched him finally get the vindication his father deserved. Dante's territories are being slowly transferred to legitimate business owners. His operations cleaned up and licensed and legal. And he tells me it will take years to fully extract himself from the world his father left him. But he's committed to it. Committed to building something clean that Sophia can be around without danger. Committed to honoring both his father's memory and the promise he made to me. We order dinner and talk about normal things, my classes at nursing school, Sophia's progress in piano, the apartment we're looking at in a better neighborhood with good schools, and a doorman and security that isn't just Dante's people, and it feels surreal sometimes, this normalcy after such chaos. But it also feels earned, like we fought for the right to have boring conversations about lease terms and parent-teacher conferences. Sophia brings over her coloring to show Dante, a picture of 3 people holding hands in front of a house, and she says it's us. We're a family now, right? And I see Dante's throat work as he swallows hard, see him look at me for confirmation, and I nod because somewhere in the last 3 months, we became that, became a unit, became people who make decisions together and plan futures together and love each other despite and because of everything we survived. The meal is perfect, leisurely, both plates eaten and shared and savored, wine sipped, not ignored, conversation flowing easy and intimate. And I think about that first night when he sat here alone ordering 2 meals that went cold while he watched me across the restaurant. Think about how desperate he looked, how broken, how determined. And I'm grateful I said no 23 times because it made night 24 mean something, made this earned instead of easy. After dinner, Dante walks us to my sister's car where Sophia will spend the night because Dante and I have plans, adult plans that involve his apartment and privacy and the physical intimacy that's been building between us for 3 months of careful courtship and Sophia-appropriate dates, and my daughter hugs him goodnight unself-consciously, says see you tomorrow for breakfast, and he promises pancakes, promises to teach her a new piano song, promises to be there. In the car alone finally, driving through the city toward his place, Dante takes my hand and says, I meant what I said that night in Sophia's room. I love you. I've loved you since the beginning. And I squeeze his fingers, say, I know, I love you too. And it's easier to say now, 3 months removed from crisis, 3 months of proving we work together in calm as well as chaos. 3 months of building something real. His apartment is different than I expected. Not ostentatious, despite his wealth. Comfortable, and lived in with books and photos and a piano in the corner that was his father's. And he plays for me, Fur-Elise, because he's been practicing to play it with Sophia. And I watch his hands move across the keys and think about how those same hands held weapons 3 months ago. How they've been gentle with my daughter, and passionate with me. How they're capable of violence and tenderness both. And I'm not afraid anymore, not wary, just grateful. We make love slowly, carefully, learning each other's bodies with the same attention we've been learning each other's hearts, and afterward lying tangled in his sheets. I think about the title he probably never knew applied to us, about how he begged me to eat dinner with him every night for 24 nights, how I refused 23 times, how on night 24 I finally said yes, but not the way he wanted, not with grace or willing acceptance, but with breakdown and desperation, and somehow that made it real, made it matter, made it the beginning of something worth all the fear and danger and risk. "What are you thinking?" he asks, his fingers tracing patterns on my shoulder. And I say, "I'm thinking about table 7, about how you sat there every night waiting for me, about how patient you were, how persistent." And he laughs softly and says, "I wasn't patient, I was terrified. Terrified you'd never say yes. Terrified something would happen before I could find a way to keep you safe. Terrified I'd lose you before I ever really had you. But I'm here," I say. "We're here, we survived, and we're building something, and Sophia likes you, and I'm in nursing school, and your father's name is cleared, and Castellano is in prison, and we get to have this. We get to have normal Friday dinners and morning pancakes, and a future." And he pulls me closer, kisses my temple, says, "Whatever you want, for the rest of our lives, whatever you want." And I realize he's still giving me choice, still asking, not demanding, still recognizing that my agency matters, that my decisions matter, that loving me means letting me lead as much as he does. I fall asleep in his arms thinking about tomorrow, about picking up Sophia and making pancakes, about the three of us at his piano learning Fur-Elise together, about the apartment we'll look at with the good schools and the doorman, about the life we're building that 3 months ago seemed impossible, and I'm grateful for every no I said because it made this yes mean everything. Grateful for the danger that forced honesty. Grateful for a man who begged instead of demanded, who protected instead of controlled, who loved me enough to let me choose him freely. And I did. I chose him. I choose him still. Every day I choose this complicated, beautiful, dangerous man who makes my daughter laugh and my heart race and my future feel possible. And when I wake in the morning to sunlight and his smile and the promise of pancakes, I know I'll keep choosing him, keep building this life, keep saying yes to dinners at table 7 where it all began, where a desperate man asked a question 24 times and a stubborn woman finally answered, not with words but with her whole heart, with her trust, with her love, with everything she had to give, and it was enough, more than enough, it was everything.